get started. Cool, well, welcome everyone. We're gonna get started with the presentation. I assume students will continue to trickle in, so that's hopefully where the recording will come in. But I'll start sharing my screen. So welcome to the Navigating Research Across Undergraduate, Master's, and PhD Programs panel. First of all, I want to thank our 5 panelists. Super gracious of you all to be giving your time explaining what your experiences have been like as an undergraduate, a master's, and a PhD student. Hopefully this will be, informational for all of us, but especially, early career graduate students and undergraduates about, what you can do to improve your undergraduate research experience, give you an idea of what it's like to be a grad student, both here at VCU and at other programs that our students have engaged in. I'm just going to go over the format a little bit. So each panelist, we have 5 of them, will speak for about 4 to 5 minutes. They each have their own little mini presentation. After each of the panelists talks, we'll give a little moment, a little beat for students to ask a question. We'll have room for 1 question after each panelist. But if you can't think of a question right off the spot, we're also going to have a full Q&A session at the end of all the panelist presentations. For that Q&A, you can send questions to me, Cameron Clay. I'm hosting the event, so I'm not presenting. My main job will just be to gather your questions and make sure they're well represented during that Q&A. You can also message me with any technical questions you have. And if you want that question directed at someone specific, you can always say that too. So yeah, you can chat those directly to me. You can also chat them directly to the panelists during the panel session, although I would recommend just sending them to me. But you can also just unmute yourself if you like. We'll give you that power for the open session. So feel free to do that and ask your questions out loud as well, whichever you're more comfortable with. So without further ado, Laura Hickey, who designed this event and launched it, will be our first panelist. So I'm just going to hand it off to you, Laura, and I'll go ahead and mute myself and just control the slides.
Thank you, Cameron. So just a little bit about me. I graduated in 2019 from Vcu Biology and Environmental Studies. That was a dual degree bachelor program. I'm currently a first-year student in the master's program in the biology department. So I'm just getting my feet wet. My thesis will be about studying forest ecology and carbon cycling. Because I've just am starting my first semester in my master's program, my part of the presentation is really going to focus on the experience I got as an undergraduate that led me to this position. Cameron, thanks. So some positions that really helped me out were lab assistant and field technician positions. As an undergraduate, I served as a lab assistant in the Coastal Plant Ecology Lab at VCU, which you can see in the bottom right corner, a photo from a field expedition there. And after my undergraduate, I served as a field technician with the Forest Ecology Lab that I'm now working with, where you can see I'm in a boom lift in that other photo looking at canopy leaf traits. Both of these kinds of positions are a great option to explore your personal research interests and build confidence. You can gain familiarity with lab cultures. I'm not talking about like what you would grow in a petri dish, but rather how students interact with each other in a certain lab, or the relationship between the PI or the principal investigator, the professor who leads the lab, and students. It's a really fun experience to be part of like a lab culture. So when you're assisting in a lab, you can definitely get some experience in that. And mostly these experiences can just really help you to gain even more independent research, really hone in on like what you want to do yourself. I think asking your professors and TAs for positions that they're aware of is the best way to get to know about these. And I've also linked a job board that's mostly ecology and conservation focused for jobs outside of VCU. Cameron, can you advance? Thanks. So like I said, that lab assistant position helped me get another research position as an undergraduate called an NSF Research Experience for Undergraduates, or an REU. This experience is what helped me choose research over law school. As a junior, I was really contemplating, do I want to go to graduate school for law, or do I want to go to graduate school for science? Both of these things were really interesting to me. What I did was go to mine was 9 weeks. They can be 8 to 10 weeks. Mine was a 9-week summer research training program in the northern part of Lower Michigan, which is just pretty much almost Canada. And I was accompanied by this wonderful group of undergraduates from across the country, from Puerto Rico, from Florida, Hawaii, California, Texas, Tennessee. I think I'm forgetting a state somewhere in there, but it was this really great group of people. And this was really influential because it was also a paid opportunity to do research. Like I said, I had previous research that helped me be competitive for one of these opportunities, but if you are able to get an opportunity, it's really supportive to you in your research and also in your personal life for things like that, because I needed that sort of support. They're open to rising sophomores, juniors, and seniors across all disciplines. I linked where you can explore the different programs that are offered every year. Cameron, you can go to my next slide. And lastly, my research experience for undergraduates, my REU, also led me into a really great position to complete a senior thesis. And this is an experience that you can have here at VCU. My senior thesis classes actually introduced me to the first lab that I was a lab assistant in. It walks you step by step through the design, data collection, analysis, everything when it comes to presenting an experiment. It's really great networking with your peers and mentors at VCU. I got so close to the other students, even those doing medical studies and things like that. And I will say that most of my senior thesis cohort from my undergraduate did end up going on to grad school later on. The same with my REU group. Some people went to grad school, some people went into industry. It all led them in the right direction for them. So there's a couple of courses involved in the senior thesis. Dr. Golding, she's in the picture with me at graduation there. She's the director of undergraduate research, and this is who you're gonna want to contact. Like I said, this was a super helpful, super formative process for me because I got to network with Sarah and with my mentor, and it actually ended up leading to me publishing a first authored article shortly following my graduation. So it's a really formative experience that can really help you out. I've linked where you can look into senior thesis and other sorts of undergraduate research. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks so much, Laura. Yeah, did anyone have a question they wanted to pose? I'll go ahead and open the chat, but also feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, Laura, I'd like to ask, so at what point did you really know that you were convinced of doing research in this field? Because you said you were also interested in doing law. So like, at what point did you really settle at this?
So I would say it was, my REU program was 9 weeks, and I would say in week 8 is when I felt sure. I still grappled with that question through my whole experience. I was like, is this really relevant? Is this what I wanted to do? But once I started kind of putting the pieces together and making like a scientific product, like a figure, and like making a conclusion, it really connected with me. And I was like, okay, I could do this. I really like this. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I know like sometimes I've met a couple of undergrad students who are also very confused as to which major they should choose. So
yeah,
I'm glad that you're sharing this with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. That's a great segue into your round, Amelia. So Amelia, sorry, I should have introduced people more. I'll do that at the beginning of each of your panels from now on. Amelia Kusi is a second-year master's student, so she's in my my year of the Master's in Biology program. Um, yeah, so without further ado, Amelia, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. So my name is Amelia Obodimkusi, and I'm a I'm a second year MS biology student. I am originally from Ghana. So just in case there are people here who are interested in traveling outside the country to pursue research, um, some part of my experience might be of help. So I came here from Ghana with my bachelor's degree to pursue my master's degree here at VCU. And I work with Dr. Kester in the insect lab. So that is what I do here. And I'm also part of GOBS. I'm delighted to be part of GOBS and also part of VCU Bridges International, which purposefully connect like international students with local students and also with other international students to be able to build a community. Yeah, I'll keep moving. Okay. Yes. So this is to explain how different my undergrad research and my graduate research has been. So first in undergrad, I had the opportunity to embark on a field course with my advisor, and we did a project on water hyacinth. Second year, I also had the opportunity to also enroll in other field-based courses. And during my third and fourth year, on my thesis, I worked on assessing macroinvertebrates. So all the research that I did in undergrad were field-based, and that was the part that I knew how to do and was doing. The statistics was done by my professor. Most of that part was done by my professor, and he explained some of the sections. So during my graduate research, it was completely like the opposite. Now I'm having to do a lot of computational analysis about my research. The data that I'm using is all citizen science data, so no field data collection and all of that. And this was the first time I was also getting introduced to our software and all of that. Although I had so much passion for statistics, but I wasn't well used to computations. So, yeah. So I was like, how was I able to survive the shift? And I'll quote from Nelson Mandela. He said, "It always seems impossible until it is done." So sometimes, probably, if you are an undergraduate here who hopes to maybe like get into graduate research, but you're wondering like some pitfalls that you would have, or like some things that you think you're not strong at. I came in as that, so I wasn't strong in computational skills. So during my first semester here at VCU, I took courses and I took computational skill courses and statistical methods. And during my second semester, that was when I began developing my thesis work and started understanding how to incorporate those computational and the statistical methods that I learned during my first semester into my thesis. And also with the committee members that I had, it also had people who were professional in these areas, so that just in case at some point I needed help, I could reach out to them. So I have a data scientist on my committee, I have a statistician on my committee, and I have two ecologists and entomologists on my team, which was a great help for the research. So I'm like, you can, if I was able to, you can. So I think that what it takes is to have the willingness and to be committed to it. So research in itself sometimes might seem to be difficult, but I think if you have the commitment and their willingness, you can learn any skill. At this point, that's what I think, that if you have the willingness, you can learn any skill and then take the step. So and have regular conversation with advisors. Let them know where you fall short. Let them know where you're not so skilled at, so that they can also advise you to gain more experience in those places. And definitely, it's great to keep in touch with senior course mates and other graduate research students. I had the opportunity to really keep in touch with Alison, who was my advisor's graduate student, and she explained a lot about how research is being carried out here, which was probably in some stages different from where I was coming from. So I needed that clarification and all of that, and that was definitely a great help for me. And also be willing to build new skills. So definitely add to what you previously knew, so that you can move on with what you do. So yeah, that brings me to the end.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amelia. Great. We have time for one question between folks. Yeah, I'll open the chat again, but feel free to unmute yourself. Any questions before we move to the next person?
If there are no questions from students, I'll pose.
None so far.
What made you decide to go to an international program rather than a program in Ghana?
Great, that's a good question. So it was through my undergraduate research, and I had a supervisor who was very straight, and with my write-up, like he wanted me to incorporate a lot of, read a lot of articles and get to write a very well thesis. So during that, I tend to use some articles that had been used by my current advisor here, like she had published. And as I kept on reading her articles, I was interested in some of the research that she was doing at the moment. That was what really like instigated my move into inquiring from her if she had an opening in her lab, and also to get the experience from outside and how the education system is different, because I had heard that a lot of times from people who had traveled outside and talked about how their system is different, and how it's good to have both experiences and see how that would shape your skill and judgment on things. So yeah, basically that.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks so much. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Latilla, I'll switch over to you. So I'll just introduce you first. Yeah. So our third presenter is Latilla Abbott, another member of the second year Masters in Biology cohort. And great. Okay. You do have access. Perfect. So yeah, without further ado, go ahead, Latilla. You might be muted. I don't know.
Okay, I just unmuted.
There you go.
I thought I had my slide up. Let's see.
Yeah, your presentation looks like it's up. You just might have to, yeah, go into presentation mode.
Let's see. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, we can see you moving your mouse, so it should be live.
Okay. Cool. All right. All right, everybody can see that?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so hello, good evening. I'm Latilla Abbott. I'm a second year master's student. I graduated in 2019 with my undergraduate in biology with a minor in chemistry. I'm not the traditional student. I'm a little bit older. I'm a proud mom of 3 beautiful girls, and I'm going to share a little bit with you. So just wanted to let you guys know what led me to research and even coming back to school in the first place during me attaining my bachelor's degree. I was diagnosed with alopecia areata when I was 16 years old. And so, but I currently have alopecia totalis. So that's when you lose like all of your hair and your eyebrows like completely gone. It's an autoimmune disease where your immune system attacks your hair follicles. So, you know, this was a pretty depressing situation, but it definitely sparked my interest as to why this was happening to me. Why does it happen to other people? How can I fix it? So it definitely led me to study more about the sciences. So I came back to school after giving birth to my last daughter. So then I come to VCU and now I'm here. So during my time at VCU, I did some undergraduate studies. I've worked in 2 laboratories as an undergrad. The first one being Dr. Rima Franklin's lab in the basement, so microbial lab, and it was actually it was a good deal. It was a paid, paid research opportunity where we had a team of other researchers would go out and collect water from the James River, and it was my job to basically filter the water so that we can see the abundance of E. coli in the water. And let me tell you, that water is not, yeah, you don't want to play around in the James River. So I'll just let you guys know that. But this is, you know, a continuous study. It's been going on for years now. And at the same time, I was also offered the opportunity to work in Dr. Derek Prosser's lab. So the picture on the right is me filtering some water. And the picture on the left is me in front of a poster of some work that was conducted with Dr. Prosser on the 3rd floor, where we study membrane biology. So my current study is clathrin-independent endocytosis. We're currently, you know, checking on proteins and how they interact and aggregate around the membrane and how it affects endocytosis and things like that. It's pretty exciting. And, but what I will say is just some bits of advice, okay? So to the students, you want to communicate with your professors. Like if you are interested in research, or even if you're not sure if you're interested, at least give yourself a chance to know, I hate it or I love it. So you want to reach out to your professors and say, hey, do you have any openings? Do you know of any laboratories with openings? And sometimes there might be openings that don't even spark your interest at first. And you never know, you'll find yourself knee deep in loving something that you never even thought of even like wanting to do. So I think it's really important to give research an opportunity. You never know where it can lead you. I also wanted to share that you might feel like imposter syndrome, like you don't belong, or how did I get here, or why am I here, or am I worthy of being here, or what can I offer to this laboratory team? And you know, it's definitely important to give yourself a shot and don't be so hard on yourself. Graduate school can be very rigorous, but it's definitely worthwhile. So that's what I have to say about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tila. Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Tila before we move on?
Yes, I do. Okay. Yeah. I must say that, first of all, I really admire that you are like being a mother and being in school at the same time and doing research. So, like, what has been the experience comparing like your undergraduates when you were doing research and being like leaving school and then coming back to do the research again? What has been your experience with that? And how would you what would you share with other people who might think of doing the same thing?
Well, I would say, to be honest, my shift from undergrad to grad was pretty, I won't say it was seamless, but it was pretty easy because I had come into Dr. Franklin's lab during my junior year. So it was already there for like a year and a half maybe. And then like also working in Dr. Prosser's lab and just seeing like two different spectrums of the sciences, one microbial, one membrane biology, is like, wow, you know. But I knew I wanted to continue while also studying for entrance into medical school. And I was kind of like at a crossroads. But at the same time, I looked at it like, okay, this can be my gap year or years to further my education in the sciences, and at the same time take advantage of all of these other experiences that I'm getting while I'm doing research and meeting my peers, you guys, and having the opportunity to even talk to undergraduates so that they know they can explore all of their options. But it definitely wasn't easy. But what made it a bit easier was the fact that I was already doing it during undergrad. So I wasn't new to the laboratory and lab techniques and things like that. So it wasn't so bad.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Tila. So yeah, let's see, if you could just unshare your screen. I think I can hop, or maybe I can just press share screen. We can get back, there we go. Cool. Let me get back to sharing my screen. Cool, great. Let's see, make sure y'all can hear me. Yeah, you can hear me. Okay, cool. Great, well, those were our master's students. So now, you know, well designed by Laura, we'll move into our ILS students who are all PhD students. We'll start off with Mallory Stevenson. I'm sorry, Mallory, if I got that wrong. You might want to. And who's a first year ILS PhD student. Yeah, so go ahead. I'll hand it off to you, Mallory, and I'll take care of the slide control.
Sounds great. Hi, nice to meet you all. My name is Mallory Stevenson. I attended Washington and Lee University for undergrad, which is located in Lexington, Virginia, just a little bit down the street. And I studied biochemistry and psychology while I was there. I enrolled in the developmental psychology PhD program at VCU in fall of 2018. And after 2 years there, decided that I wanted to transition my focus a little bit. And so I switched to the Integrative Life Sciences PhD program. And so now I am involved in Dr. Alexis Edwards' lab at the Virginia Institute for Psychiatric and Behavioral Genetics. And I study genetic and environmental influences on alcohol use disorder and suicidal behavior, which is a mouthful. If you want to click, and I included a picture of my dogs because that makes every presentation better. And you can hear Winston participating in the background probably. Okay, so my undergraduate research experience, I participated in a Howard Hughes Medical Institute research fellowship. This is a 2-year program that involves 2 9-week summer research experiences. They are paid, and then during the school year, you work unpaid 4 hours a week in the lab. I do believe this does exist at VCU. I think they have pretty limited spots. It looked like it had only been awarded a couple of times in the past, but it was a wonderful experience. I think that this is a key example of why it's important to get to know your professors. I worked with Dr. Eric Uffelman, who is a professor at Washington and Lee, and he happened to be my instructor for Chem 101. I showed up to his office hours every week to ask him lots of random questions. And then at the end of the semester, he asked if I would join his lab and endorse my application to HHMI. So that's kind of how I ended up in that position. As far as what we actually did, my research was focused on chemical analysis of cultural heritage objects. So we were doing a lot of different, we were using a lot of different methods. In the bottom right corner, you can see a scanning electron microscope that we were using to map paint cross sections. And then on the left, you can see I'm X-raying a painting. We went all over the place. I've worked in museums on the left, I'm in the Netherlands. We went to DC, we worked at the VMFA. So we went all around analyzing different paintings and kind of guiding conservation efforts. Thank you. Okay, so you might be wondering, these two things are completely different. And so how did this even happen? I went from studying paintings to 3 months later, learning about complex trait genetics. So pretty confusing. Thank you. Yeah, if you just want to go one forward. So a few things to keep in mind. Oh no, sorry, back one, thanks. In terms of why I wanted to make the switch, cultural heritage analysis was amazing, but there weren't a lot of careers available. And so I knew that, I always knew kind of going in, probably I wouldn't be able to pursue a PhD in that field. And so I was really looking for something that combined my interests in biochemistry and psychology, and psychiatric genetics was a pretty perfect fit for that. But that doesn't mean that my undergrad research experience wasn't useful. A lot of the skills that I learned still transferred over. I learned how to collaborate with people. I learned how to write up reports, which was particularly helpful since we were working with conservators. You're working with people who don't work with scientific data every day. And so you learn how to explain things, which was still helpful. Also, my coursework was important because I knew I wanted to pursue psychiatric genetics. I could at least tailor what I was studying to that field, even if my research wasn't super relevant. And I think my research experience helped me figure out what I did want to do, even if I didn't end up pursuing that field. Okay, thank you. On a bit of a different note, I wanted to highlight one potential opportunity to get involved in research at VCU. That's called the Vcu Great Program. This was started a couple of years ago by some faculty in the psychology department, and it provides funded research training under the guidance of a VCU faculty mentor. It's a paid research position. It lasts 8 weeks from mid-May to mid-July. And they prefer for second-year students from backgrounds that are historically underrepresented to apply. I believe that if you're in a different year, you're still welcome to apply. They just want to put it out there that that's what they're looking for. So this is a great opportunity if you're interested in a little bit more of the behavioral side of things. I think they have 1 or 2 geneticists on board too as mentors. So great experience to have.
I think I'm muted. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Mallory. Any questions people had? Let me open up the chat. I also wanted to note Mallory and others have provided really helpful links to undergraduate and other research opportunities. So we'll make sure to provide this presentation for students who were able to attend this along with the recording.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask a question. So I know probably you've been asked this question before, but what made you want to get a PhD after getting the previous degree that you had? Is it that you thought the research skills that you had, you wanted more, or like what made you, what was there? What, yeah.
So I'll say it wasn't an easy decision. I wasn't one of those people that went into undergrad knowing that I wanted to go to graduate school and that would be what I wanted to do. I think it really was that fellowship that led me to want to pursue research. I really enjoyed it. It was a super special experience. I know I included one picture of like our whole team. We were really close. And so I think that helped too, that I had such a great support system. And then I think something else that's important to note is that I still, because I was interested in other career paths, I shadowed doctors. I still tried to explore those other options and either rule them in or rule them out. And so some of it was a process of elimination too, where I tried other things and I didn't like them, and I did like research. And so I knew that was what I wanted to do. Thanks, Amelia.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, yeah, it looks like it's time for our last panelist. So our last panelist is Sean Powers. He is an ILS PhD student. Further along, I think, Sean, I forget what year you are. You may want to, did you say 4th?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. 4th year PhD student. So it looks like your presentation has some graphics to it. So I'll try to
just skip over the animations. It's fine.
Okay, cool. I'll try to introduce a whole slide together then. Yeah, go ahead, Sean. I'll mute myself.
Hi, everyone. So I thought I'd start off just kind of sharing my research journey. So I graduated in 2006, and during my undergrad year, I was fortunate enough to be involved in a couple of projects where I was studying hovering flight energetics in hummingbirds, and also was able to participate in a long-term population study with some spiny lizards. And then after I graduated, I decided to go into a master's program at Western Washington University, where I kind of continued on with doing some lizard work, studying lizard energetics in Washington. So I did that for 3 years and finished in December 2010, and decided that I wanted to continue on to a PhD. Just to kind of give you a background about how I kind of made that decision. So I was married at the time. My wife was also going to graduate school in Portland. So I heard about this opportunity about someone who was starting a new lab at Portland State through mutual colleagues, and I had a discussion with them and decided to apply to the PhD program to join their lab. And their focus was looking at courtship behavior and red-sided garter snakes. So this wasn't the smoothest graduate journey because after a couple years in that program with that advisor, it just was not working out for me. And so I ended up deciding to leave that program because it just wasn't a good fit between me and my advisor at that time. So I left that program in 2012 and then was kind of in limbo for a few years, but was able to continue being involved in research during that time. And so I was able to be a part of another hummingbird study looking at heat dissipation during flight, and then also looking at how body temperature relates to courtship behavior in garter snakes. And during this time, I was trying to apply to different graduate programs, which took me a few years to find one, and then which ended up being the ILS program at VCU. So you can go to the next slide. You can skip over the animations. So I joined the VCU ILS program in 2017. So I'm in my 4th year now in Salvatore Augusta's lab. I'm kind of focused, you could say, as we do a lot of physiological ecology and macrophysiology. My dissertation is focusing on the gypsy moth invasion, where the central question to my dissertation is, how does climate influence thermal physiology, and how does that alter species spread and distributions? So just the image on the left side is the current gypsy moth range, which covers a lot of the Northeast and even goes up into Canada in North America. And looking at previous studies trying to predict where gypsy moth could be, actually came to the conclusion that most of the United States could be fairly habitable for a gypsy moth. Which is, a problem with invasive species. But if you look at their range over time, and if this last figure, which is looking at Virginia, when you look at the range line in the south, we actually see that there's been some range retraction, unlike what was predicted in the previous studies. So, so I am trying to get at this question is, what about climate and thermal physiology is limiting gypsy moth from spreading further south? So, next slide. Okay. So that is kind of my research journey and where I ended up now at VCU. And so some kind of my advice and stuff that a lot of people have already touched on, as far as if you're an undergrad and you're interested in getting involved in research or not really sure if research is for you, everybody's already said this, but, definitely talk to your professors and even the TAs of the labs that you really enjoy. You never know what opportunities they might have for students. And, these experiences will be important, especially nowadays. A lot of programs will want to know what kind of experience you have as far as research goes. And so having these opportunities to be a part of research in other labs can be really important. I'd also kind of bring up, there are opportunities you can look at outside of VCU, and some other people have already talked about this. One that I was a part of during my undergrad was the American Museum of Natural History has research stations around different parts of the country. This one is the Southwestern Research Station, which is where I did some lizard work. They have an intern and volunteer program where people can apply, and what they do is they basically they work at the station as a volunteer, and they do that about 24 hours per week. But the rest of the time is they have to themselves. And so they're able to be a part of many research projects that are going on there. And people that go there to do work actively look for volunteers to help them with their projects. So if you are really interested in ecology related things, this is a really great opportunity and something that I would highly recommend. It's in the Chiricahua Mountains, which is a really cool place. And there's a huge diversity of projects that happen down there. So that is one plug that I will give as far as, an opportunity that you can look for to be involved. All right, so you can go to the next slide. So these are some of my just final thoughts based on my journey through graduate school after undergrad. So I know a lot of people mention, a lot about paid positions and whatnot for doing undergrad research, which is great, and I totally understand that getting paid is really important these days. But I'd also just recommend to take advantage of opportunities that you may come across, even if they're unpaid. If you happen to be able to get into a lab that is really well known in their field, that recommendation from that PI can actually go a really long way when trying to get into other graduate programs. So that's something to think about. Based on my journey, having a really good relationship and fit with your advisor is extremely important and is paramount to your time in the grad program. If you don't have a good relationship with your advisor, it's just not going to be fun for you, and may even deter you from doing other things. So my big thing, at least from my experience in applying to a bunch of graduate programs, is the first thing that I would do before you even look at the program itself is just reach out to labs and talk to the PIs. If they're interested in having you, that's really the most important first step into trying to apply to programs. So that way you have that in, and then, they can work on your behalf depending, when you start applying to programs. And with that, I would also mention, as some others have said, don't let things like GPA and GRE scores deter you from applying to grad school. I will tell you that I had a pretty mediocre GPA as well as GRE scores, which, can be a little bit of a barrier, but if you have research experience and have good recommendations, sometimes those can be more important than actually those requirements for applying to programs. And with that, just be persistent. It took me a while to find a lab in a program, but if you keep at it, there's going to be something for you. And the last thing I would say is that when you're going to grad school, there really isn't this expectation for you to have everything figured out or to know everything. I think that is a big misnomer that gets perpetuated these days. Like, you need to go into grad school with a whole project planned out. And that's just really not the case. The point of grad school is for you to learn how to gain the skills of being a good scientist. Developing a project and, research comes after that. And your advisor's role is to help you figure that out.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. Yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, any questions for Sean before we kind of go into our open Q&A session? I'll go
I
ahead
have a
and open up
question.
the chat.
First, I want to say snaps to Sean for pointing out, taking us all down a level that, yeah, we don't have to have things figured out. Your GPA and your GRE are not like an end all be all at all when it comes to grad school. But I did have a question. In your time between the PhD program that you left and the PhD program here, what was like your job position or job title that you were doing that was still related to hummingbird research?
So I will say that unfortunately, I was not able to find work using my degrees. I was just working like warehouse jobs. So unlike most people, my dad is actually a professor at the school I went to undergrad. And so he does a lot of research. I was able to get involved in those projects through him and helping out with, basically what he needed to get done, because I had a master's degree, so I could do a little bit more work than what his undergrads could. But, I would still say, like, even if you find yourself in the position that I was in, and you're still close to the professors location-wise, if you reach out to them and, I'm sure they can probably help you out in, finding ways to get involved in their work if you're in a similar position.
Yeah. I mean, really, it just shows how important networking is and keeping in touch. Cool. Thank you.
One other thing I would maybe mention to the undergrads that are here, given that during the times of COVID and a lot of meetings are going virtual, you might try seeing if you can attend some of those, because the fees are a little bit cheaper than they normally would because they are virtual, and those are good places to just get exposed to a bunch of different labs and what they're doing. So that might be something to look into as well.
And you're talking about like conference meetings, like
yeah,
larger.
conference meetings and whatnot.
Yeah. That's a good piece of advice.
Cool. Well, I'll go ahead and stop the share. Thanks y'all for, making such cool conversations happen. And so what I'll do now is I'll have the chat window open. And yeah, if students have questions, we have a couple students here. Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself or send it in the chat and I can ask it for you. But yeah, now's the time to just ask folks anything you want about maybe a specific question about what they said or anything that's that you're wondering about in terms of being a grad student or an undergrad researcher. Okay, cool. Looks like, I got one in the chat for a student wondering about, so their question is, I'm considering either going to a PhD or a master's program. How did you make the decision? So I guess that's pretty much to everyone. I don't know where to start. Maybe the chronological would be helpful.
I most recently made this decision, I think, kind of. Mallory is in a similar place as well, I think. But I was interested in PhD programs and MS programs, both. For me, I decided that the time commitment for a PhD wasn't necessarily in my cards, and I wasn't sure about staying in academia. I'm actually interested in careers with possibly policy, governmental, or nonprofit work, where a PhD might not necessarily be required. I think when choosing an MS or a PhD, for me, I was really looking up jobs that I was interested in and seeing what they required. So trying to figure out, and I looked at jobs across so many different fields, but you really want to base your degree because you don't want to be overqualified and spend a lot of time becoming overqualified, or you don't want to be conversely underqualified. So if you just have an MS and you need a PhD for the positions you're aiming for, you want to make sure you go that route.
Yeah, I agree with Laura. I think it really depends on what your end goal is. So for me, I also considered a master's degree, and a master's in genetics would have allowed me to do a lot of different lab work, maybe be involved in genetic testing. But I eventually decided that I was interested in academia. And so if I wanted to teach, I needed a PhD to do that. So I think it's, like Laura said, it's important to consider what your end goal is and what's going to get you there.
So when I finished graduate school, when I finished undergrad, I wasn't sure what direction I really wanted to go. So I decided to do a master's degree first, and then see where I was at after the master's degree, and decided I liked it and continued to go forward. I guess my kind of 2 cents on this would be, if you aren't really confident about whether or not a PhD would be a good fit for you, then I wouldn't start with a PhD. If you look at the school you're going to and they have both a master's and PhD program, it's a lot easier to transition from a master's degree into a PhD generally. I've had friends who've done this. It's a lot harder to go backwards. And just kind of echoing what everybody else said, if you know what your end goals are, look at, what is required for that and whether or not you really need a PhD or not.
Quick follow-up just to kind of fold it in. I have a question coming in. Students wondering whether any of the panelists think that an MS or PhD would fit better if they're interested in the bio industry, in terms of, industry rather than academia. So yeah, I would love to get the people who haven't answered yet, if you want to fold that in to your thoughts, and the rest, I'd love to hear the rest of y'all's opinions on that too.
I work sometime for a pharmaceutical laboratory, and I've seen both master's and PhD students, and it just seems as though the master's students or master's graduates, they were like senior scientists or just under the senior scientists. If you had a bachelor's, you would enter as like an entry-level scientist, and then the PhD, the people who had their PhD, they were like in research and design. So they would ask the questions for some of the pharmaceutical companies that wanted their drugs tested by us. So it seemed like they did more of writing, like writing of the manuscripts and doing like research on maybe past experiments that been done already, to like try to incorporate it into their own writings for our experiments for whatever projects we were working on. So, but the PhDs definitely made more money, and they had more experience with reading and writing for sure. And then I did notice that some master's students, I keep saying students, scientists who held master's degrees, if they had previous work experience on top of the master's degree, it was like equivalent to the PhD. So I noticed that with like industry. That was my experience.
So one thing I will just leave with you. So the former director of the ILS program kind of likes to show us statistics about students and where they end up going. And they always like to show the statistic of graduates, only about like 10% of people coming from the ILS program actually end up getting jobs in academia. Most of the graduates from the ILS PhD program actually end up going to industry. And there are some reasons for that, because the ILS program is very unique compared to other PhD programs. But, I would say that there's definitely a lot more opportunities in industry relative to academia.
Cool. Yeah, it seems like we have those kind of questions answered. Did anyone else want to touch on one of those two? Cool. We got ones that we kind of had set previously just to kind of get the ball rolling. I'll go back to those. what's one piece of advice you would tell your undergraduate self about something you might do differently now, knowing what you know now in graduate school?
I have one or a few things. I would tell myself to not overdo my schedule. Like make sure my classes are in good proximity to the laboratory. Make sure that I sit down with my PI and really strategize a schedule that would work for everyone so that my needs are met as a student and his needs are met as me being a researcher. And to definitely just like check in very often with, your mentor, so like you're on the right path, you're on the right track. Keeping your schedule like not too crazy, because you don't want to take on too much and then you can't perform efficiently.
I'll say that as an undergraduate, I think I wish I would have maybe committed a little bit earlier to things. My research kind of all happened in like my senior year, but what really held me back from this was me thinking that if I made a commitment as a sophomore or a freshman, that I was making that commitment for life, and you're not. Mallory is a great example of that. She completely switched directions, but it was still relevant. Figuring out something doesn't work for you is just as important as figuring out something does work for you. So really go for the opportunities that your gut is telling you to go for. The worst thing people can say is no, and you just find another opportunity and help yourself navigate forward.
I'm gonna chime in a little bit if that's okay with you guys. So I'm actually not on the panel here, but I am a member of GOBS. I'm Bo. I am a master's student as well. So kind of going off of what Laura was saying, an important thing to keep in mind is that whether you stick with research or not, it's always useful to have this sort of thing on like your CVs and your resumes and any kind of applications you have for any kind of like future programs, whether it's actual research or a job or med school even, because they love to see those kinds of things. So yeah, even if you don't want to stick with it, you can always walk out with having that on your list of activities. And I think it's a lot of schools look very favorably upon that kind of stuff. But yeah, also I think, what was I gonna say? Sorry. I am drawing a blank, I'm sorry.
Cool. Well, we do have one more great question that came in. Oh, Amelia, did you want to?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amelia.
Yeah, so mine might sound a little bit funny, but what I think I would have done was to appreciate the critiques that really came from my advisors, because I started early by sharing with them my goals of being in academia and hopefully continue with my master's when I'm done with my undergraduate. So my advisor would pile like a lot of articles for me to read. And when I came and gave feedbacks, he'd be like, no, didn't you see this? You were supposed to take note of all of these. And at that point, I felt like that was too much. And although I even took some of the critiques, I was fed up like with him. But now when I look back, I really appreciate him. I wish I had known that when I was in that position. So just in case you have someone to talk to and they are giving you some critiques or advising you one way or the other, I think it will be good to take them into consideration rather than feel like it's something that is beyond you. You might miss the good thing that you're supposed to learn in the process.
Thank you for reminding me about papers. I was gonna say, a good way to get in touch with your PIs is to read one of their papers. So if you like look up their name on VCU's website and find their publications, like if you take the time to actually read what they've kind of written, you don't have to go into all the gritty nitty-gritty details with like the methods and stuff, because that's too much jargon at this point for you guys. But if you can get like the main ideas down, like that kind of stuff really impresses them, I think, and gets them more in the mood with wanting to talk to you guys. So if you want to help get like a foot in the door with getting into research labs, that's always a good thing if you can read your actual professor's papers ahead of time. But yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, if everyone felt good about that one, I do have one more, and I'll say it can be kind of our last one unless we get like a quick one at the end, just because we're over time now. But we got a question. It says, I was wondering how to reach out to potential professors that are from different universities. So like if you're applying to a graduate school that, you know, if you're an undergrad at VCU, but you want to apply somewhere else, how you guys got that working. And it you know, Bo brought up a good point about reading literature. What else did y'all that came from another university do?
Yeah, I was essentially, I get it kind of like cold calling professors, which sounds funny, but I had a not generic email, but just an email that I would send to any professor that I was interested in working with that said like, hi, I'm Mallory Stevenson. I would give a little bit of my background, you know, what school I go to, what I study, what I do, say why I'm interested in working with them. I think like Bo said, it helps if you're specific there, not just like, I'm interested in biology, but like I saw this paper and saw that you're also really interested in studying the genetics of schizophrenia, and so am I. And so then you can kind of make a connection that way, and then ask if they're accepting anyone in their lab. And I had some professors respond and say, no, I don't have any spaces, like don't bother sending in your application. And that's actually helpful to know because you're not wasting time on something that is not even possible because they don't have money to pay you. So that kind of helped me narrow down my list of where I wanted to apply.
Yeah, similar to Mallory, I kind of ended up having just like, I'll say generic email that I would kind of alter depending on who I was sending it to, just kind of laying out who I was, you know, what my general interests were in research, and, you know, kind of tell them how I thought my interests would kind of mesh well with theirs. So I think that's kind of a good way to start. If you happen to end up with any sort of like anything that you happen to co-author while you're there, like maybe even a poster or something like that, you know, I would always send stuff like that along with my email, just so they'd have that to look at. And so that's what I would do. I would even say, like, even if they tell you no, you know, they're going to have colleagues and at other places. I don't think there's anything wrong with being like, well, thanks for letting me know, but can you suggest, you know, some other people that might be worth contacting? That's something to think about too. But I will admit, for me, it was just a lot of internet searching and looking at people's labs. That's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah, just to add to what has been said, I think also looking at the website is very important, and most of them post information on whether they are going to accept students, if they have funding for it at that moment. And yeah, so if you are writing the emails to inquire, they expect that you should have read all those on their website. So when you're coming in from the point like you know nothing about them, I think sometimes that doesn't encourage them to respond in a good, positive way. So it will be great that the email, even you can include that I went to your website and read this and that, and I'm emailing you based on this information. So yeah.
Sorry, one last thing. You don't have to put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, even if it's something you really aren't interested in first, because Tila brought this up earlier. You should definitely apply to as many labs as you can, just so you have options available to you. So again, that'll add up to your experience no matter where you go to, but just don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. But that's it for me.
Alrighty, well, yeah, there's no other questions in the chat on the docket. So yeah, I think that's it for the panel. So yeah, thank you panelists, first of all, so much for coming. It's awesome to, not only is it helpful for the undergrads that attended, but it's great for the master's students to hear from the PhD students about their process and their experience. For those undergrads that did come, if you want access to the PowerPoint, go ahead and private chat me your email and I can make sure that PowerPoint's available. We'll also work to make the recording in PowerPoint available in similar places that we made the advertisements for the events available. Great, yeah, and I see those coming in. Cool, well, yeah, well, thank you all so much. Thank you, undergrads. Thank you, grad students. I hope you all found this helpful, and for you grad students, yeah, that it was a rewarding experience for you as well. Yeah, and please feel free to reach out to any of us that you received advertisements to. We can also figure out if we can get you emails for folks as another resource. So yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, we can close out there, but I hope everyone has a great rest of your night.
Thanks, you
Yeah, and
guys.
I'll see some of you guys around. See you.